Hey guys, Wolvie here and welcome back to the channel. As always, the usual disclaimer, any opinion here is mine and mine alone. Now I'm going to go into a mini life update before I get into the meat and potatoes of this particular video, which is what you see on the screen before you. Now I had a bit of a cold not so long ago. I am over it, and I did have a previous recording of this particular topic, but I wasn't confident enough to post it. So that's the mini life update. So here we go. And for this, the meat and potatoes for this particular video, it is the newest Hunger Games novel, which is called Sunrise on the Reaping. It is another prequel to the original trilogy. Now, the only thing we know about this particular novel is, believe it or not, this is the second quarter quell with additional information. Now, some of us would probably been like, we already know about the second quarter quell from Catching Fire, which is true, but there's always information, from certain things that we still need to know. And with this being the decision regarding the second quarter quell being the focus of a new novel, I think it's the right move for the reason that's like, let's explore certain things further. Even though we have bits and pieces of it in a previous novel, we can explore things further. And with the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, that's a prequel in itself. And exploring certain things in the past before the original trilogy, I feel it's a good idea. And for the fact that people were like saying, oh, we should have been seeing things like further back, it's like, when it comes to like the flow of the original trilogy, you have the 74th Hunger Games, the third quarter quell, and the events of Mockingjay that came after. It's like certain aspects of like consistency of like when this took place. I feel that it would have been the wrong move, for like the first revolution, all that stuff, the Dark Days, that would have thrown that off by quite a bit. And for the second quarter quell with more information and a younger Haymitch being the focus here, I feel this was the right move. Because you have to remember, in the first Hunger Games book, Haymitch is the only surviving victor from District 12 when the whole thing with Katniss and Peeta. Because we know that at some point towards the end of the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, Lucy Gray dies. We simply don't know how. Suzanne Collins is a genius for leaving her death and fate up to the individual reader. Let me grab this book back so that way I don't look like a school kid. Anyway, so for this to be the next book in the prequel direction, this is the right call. Now, we do know that the book is coming out early 2025. The movie that this will be tied to is coming out towards the end of towards the end of 2026. I'm hearing November, but I could be wrong. But we do know this much. And regarding the pricing and the artwork you're seeing, take both items with a grain of salt. So let me take off my cap so you guys can see me a little bit better. It's kind of hot out here, so bear with me. If you're in my part of the U.S., please stay cool. Don't do what I just did and go to an Amazon hub locker to pick up your orders. Anyway, we do know we're going to be seeing a younger Haymitch, but the question remains towards President Snow. Which version will we be seeing in this novel and then the movie? And I ask this because we do know that earlier this year, Donald Sutherland, who portrayed the OG President Snow, has passed away. And to his family, I extend my condolences, thoughts, and prayers to you during this time. And Donald Sutherland, he was an amazing President Snow. Just like, he was so believable. I thought for a while he was a good guy when he wasn't. And I'm referring to the character, not the actor. So anyway, so the question comes down to President Snow during this movie. We simply do not know the route they're going to go in sense of like casting this character, because we do know he's around in the Battle of Songbirds and Snakes. He dies at the end of Mockingjay along with President Coin. Spoiler, in case you guys haven't done either, and by either movie or book viewing. So we know that much. So it's going to be a really interesting call. And I kind of say this because for those of you who are into Star Wars, a bit of off topic but very necessary. We noticed that the episode 7, 8, and 9 of that particular bracket of the Star Wars trilogy, we do know that Carrie Fisher, who portrayed Princess Leia, passed. So they had to be really creative, regarding of like how is she going to be involved in like episodes 8. I would say more so episode 9 than episode 8, but yeah. They had to be really creative with like her character being part of that particular trilogy. And by that, episodes 7 through 9. And more specifically within it, episode 9. So it's going to be really interesting to see, with President Snow, who's going to portray him, Alec, during this time, because you're talking a 40-year gap between the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes and Sunrise on the Reaping. And the whole thing with the second quarter quell, I'm referring to this one right here, we do know that the number of contestants has doubled from 24, like it's usually been done, to 48. So we are going to be finding out the identities of the other two District 12 tributes, because we do know there's a female that Haymitch, was like kind of buddies with, that sort of speak. And we do know that Haymitch eventually wins. So we're going to be finding out the identities of the other two District 12 tributes, along with potential other characters. Because we do know the whole, and I mean, you're trying to formulate words right now, but just like, the hype I have for this is like, it's going to be like, I'm just like at a loss for words, but in a good way. And I'm going to be curious as to whether or not they're going to be introducing a Coin here, but as a younger version as opposed to the one we've seen in the Mockingjay films as well as the Mockingjay novel. So it's going to be really, really, really interesting to see. And regarding the trilogy, this particular trilogy, the prequel batch, what led up to the original Hunger Games trilogy, is like, when it comes to that eventual third book, who are they going to focus it on? Because what I've noticed here is a bizarre pattern, and it's not like the number I'm going to give out, but it's the multiple that gets to that number. It's the multiple, so keep that in mind. Now, for those of you who remember the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, that was the 10th Hunger Games. The very first Hunger Games book was the 74th. Now, to do a little bit of math to get to the 10th one, so you had to do a bit of subtraction. So, in order to get the final number to 10, you have to think about what gets subtracted from 74 to equal to 10. That's 64, right? So you may be thinking 64 is the number in question, but no. You take the year gap, between the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes and the first Hunger Games book. So you think about that as 64, but there is a number within it where it's like the first book in this trilogy and the first book of the prequel trilogy. So the number, and because the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes was the 4th book, so the number 4 kind of comes into mind. So 64 divided by 4 is 16. And the number I'm referring to from like a minute ago is the number 4. Meaning that the 4th movie, Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, being like in a sense of aspects of ties to the very first Hunger Games book, which is the 74th games. And you have to think about like common like denominators, common factors, sort of thing. So the number for Hunger Games and then Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes is the number 4, because you have to think about like it's a bizarre connection I'm looking at thus far. Now for Sunrise on the Reaping, it's like the third quarter quell, which is Catching Fire, the 75th games. And then you have here the second quarter quell, or the 50th of Hunger Games. The number for, in this case, to make a bit of a connection is the number 5. Because you have to think about it. 25 divided by 5 is 5. And you're kind of wondering how on earth I'm able to do that in my head without pen and paper or even a calculator. It's just like 5 squared is 25. The square root of 25 is 5. I mean, there's certain numbers where it's like you can only like do it one way for like math reasons. And talking about the 5th movie, the 5th book. Now, I'm going to check the time here real quick. So I am making good time. So I'm going to go into this particular section where I feel there are 3 potential candidates who could be the focus of the 6th book. Now, these all have very compelling arguments for and against them equally. They've all been mentioned in some capacity in Catching Fire and or Mockingjay. So you talk about the 3rd book, Mockingjay, and then the 6th movie. So I'm guessing here is that the Hunger Games that the 6th book is going to be coming out is going to be like that, and 6 is going to be like the common number between the events in Mockingjay and the events in the 6th book whenever that comes out. And for the record, I have been reading and hearing that Suzanne Collins is going to be going into things like the dark days of the First Revolution in future books. So it's something we just have to be extremely patient on. So at this point, I'm going to go over 3 candidates where the 6th book could lie on. Now, they may not be part of that like math-esque like equation that I was able to figure out, but they have compelling compelling arguments all the same. And this is in addition to them all surviving at the end of Mockingjay. They are all past winners, and to quote-unquote put some salt on the wound, they're all women. So, who are these characters that are potential for the focus of the 6th book? The first of 3 female past victors of the Hunger Games, she's been mentioned, she's featured in both Catching Fire along with Mockingjay, and she comes out as a survivor in the end of all this, is Johanna Mason. Now, she actually has some I wouldn't say varying, but she actually has a similar like number of common things with Haymitch, in the sense of losing everything and then being alone at the end of Mockingjay. So it's one of those things where it's just like she actually has a compelling argument. And then in her particular games, it's just like she had it's like, I think many of you have heard the saying, fake it until you make it. And that's pretty much what she was doing to win her games. It's like she faked it like nobody's business, and then when the time was right, she unleashed her true self. And that's how she won her games. And her particular games was really recent in the sense that it was a few years before the 74th Hunger Games. She actually has a pretty compelling case. And again, like Haymitch, Johanna, lost everything like after her games, and then she becomes totally alone in the end. So she actually has a very compelling argument here. But what sets her back from being a potential focus point for the 6th book is that what helps also hurts. That common ground. You lose everything, that sort of thing. Now, regarding casting for Sunrise on the Reaping, I am curious to see if Woody Harrelson will reprise the role as Haymitch, but in a more brief context, if that makes any sense. So, Johanna Mason, she actually has a surprisingly strong argument, sense of like, being a focus for a future Hunger Games novel, because again, we're talking about somebody who played a role in the Second Revolution. She is alive at the end of Mockingjay. If that makes any sense. So that's candidate number 1. Candidate number 2, believe it or not, is Annie Cresta. Now, I'm going to go back to Johanna real briefly. So she won the 71st Hunger Games. Annie Cresta, however, was the victor the year before, the 70th. Now, when it comes to like certain math stuff, you know, this divided by this equals that. Now, she does have a compelling case in that regard. Now, like Johanna, she comes out alive at the end of Mockingjay. Now, I will say this in defense for Finnick. I mean, he's going to be an honorary mention as of this recording. The reason why he is, again, he does die in Mockingjay, but the way he goes out in Mockingjay is like a complete badass. So that's all I'm going to say. So Finnick actually does have, like, you know, a solid argument in his own right, but I really don't see him, you know, being a focus point. But if he does become a focus point for the 6 games, I'm not going to complain, because, you know, he's got a solid argument. But Annie, she does come out surviving at the end of Mockingjay. I feel that she deserves it a little bit more than Finnick, in my personal opinion. And I'm not ranking the 3 here in like importance, believe it or not, so that sort of thing. And then I do want to mention here a bit of a hint between both Catching Fire and Mockingjay is that there's no real time gap between like the ending of one thing and then the beginning of the next book. Although in Mockingjay you do get a sense of quite a few time gaps, especially in the monologue. Not monologue, epilogue, not monologue, epilogue. Ha! But anyway, I do feel that Annie has a stronger case in the sense of like the focus of the 6 games, because she does lose a good deal, and not the way that Johanna has lost everything, but it's just like there's just something with Annie. Just like I think it may be her. And I mean, it's a bit of a wait and see when the 6th book comes out. Now, the 3rd character, like, she is briefly brought up in Mockingjay. She's from, I mean, the character, like, the actress who portrays her in Mockingjay, I believe is part 2, is from the Game of Thrones. It's from District 2. And it's just like, it's a bit of a surprise, you know, when this character is brought up in the way she has been. And like Annie and Johanna, she's also a survivor at the end of Mockingjay. And that is, quote-unquote, Commander Lime. Now, Commander Lime, she is from District 2. Now, I have to really read up which Hunger Games that Lime won. And my gut is telling me it's like she was the year after the Second Quarter Quell. So there's very, very little known about her. We do know she won a previous Hunger Games, like Haymitch, like Annie and Johanna, but there's just so little known about her. I was reading certain things on the web about about Lime, and the fact that people want to see more of her story. And there's a part of me where it's just like, because there's so much unknown about Lime, this is actually the best candidate of the bunch. And I really, really would like to see more of Lime's character, in the sense of like, yeah, she's from a career district. She switched sides in Mockingjay. She's found to like have switching sides on Mockingjay, being like pro-capital, and then you see here in Mockingjay, she's pro-revolution. She changed. And for that type of change, if you think about McCoy, it's like, yeah, you see that it's a surprisingly drastic change. And for Lime to be like a person like of this type of change, I could totally see the 6th book being about her. Because again, she was, I mean, the chick here you see that played Commander Lime in Mockingjay Part 2, I'm like, It's like, it's brief, but it's like so impactful. It's like such a badass. And the fact that, for those of you who watched the end of Game of Thrones, the character she portrays on Game of Thrones, she actually lives. So it's like, this makes, I mean, if I were to like choose which one I really want to see the sixth like book and movie on, it's this one. We know the least about her, even less than Annie and Johanna put together. And it's like, this is, some people are wanting Lime. And if I were to have to pick between those three, Lime gets the first vote, and then Johanna and Annie be like tied for second. There's just so little about her. It's just like, Lime deserves her story to be told. And I mean, this is the third, and again, this is the third of the three. But again, if I were to want one person to have their story told that's in the sixth book, it's definitely Lime. Lime gets my vote. Because it's like, there's just so little you know about her. And then there are people who want to know more about her. No, yeah, she's from a career district. What prompted her to change from being, quote unquote, a career pro-capital, going from that to being pro-revolution, to have a more united Panem? So on that, we're gonna see this at the end for this video. The next video will be this particular ring. It's a bit of a heart monitor ring. It's a piece of jewelry. This is gonna be the next product review right here. You're seeing the ring right here. No, I'm not married. It's what you would call a heart monitor ring, like. But yeah, this is most likely going to be the next video. I'm hoping to plan up this weekend a venue review for the Color Factory, because that's where I was yesterday, like making the most of my time off from work. So it's like, you know what, let me do an impromptu visit to the Color Factory. That way I can get certain things out of my nose hairs. So on that, to recap everything, good thing I have a few minutes left, is that we do know we do know the next book, Sunrise on the Reaping, that's on the second quarter quell. My biggest question, in a good way, is will Woody Harrelson revise the role of Haymitch in a more briefer context? My other question is a good one, is like, what will they do with President Snow in sense of casting? And then when it comes to the sixth book, this is who I want the sixth book to be on. Lime, because there's so little known about her. We do know that there's a bit of a change between the game she won and now. It's like I feel she's the most deserving. Although Annie and Johanna, they make equally compelling arguments on their own. The reason why I'm not really too keen on Johanna's stories, because she's so like Haymitch, like after, winning the games, which is really sad. And then for Annie, just like, granted, she comes out on top. She has her son with like Finnick. We do know that Finnick dies in Mockingjay, so it's just like, we know I think we know just enough about Annie to come to our own conclusions. And again, this is who I want to see. And I'm done with this video. With Wolvie here signing off. I will catch you all on the flip side.